weathered gate of Blackwood Ranch creaked in the Montana wind as Maya Chen stepped onto land she'd inherited but never seen. Her grandfather had been dead 3 months, and this 5,000-acre wilderness was supposed to be empty, abandoned for over a decade. But the massive paw prints in the mud told a different story. Standing slowly, she brushed dirt from her jeans and surveyed the landscape stretching endlessly before her. Rolling hills covered in autumn grass gave way to dense forests in the distance, all of it painted golden by the late afternoon sun. Beautiful, yes. Empty? Apparently not. Her grandfather, Thomas Chen, had been a mystery even in life. A man who'd called once a year on her birthday, sent cryptic postcards from remote locations, and somehow managed to accumulate this vast Montana property despite claiming to be just an old rancher. Maya's mother had always spoken of him with a mixture of love and frustration, calling him brilliant but secretive, generous but impossible to understand. The will had been simple, everything to Maya, his only grandchild. The lawyer in Missoula had handed over the keys with a strange expression, mentioning that the property taxes were paid up for the next 5 years and that there was a substantial account designated for maintenance costs. When Maya asked what needed maintaining on an abandoned ranch, the lawyer had simply shrugged. Now, walking the gravel road that wound toward the main house, Maya began to understand his confusion. The property didn't look abandoned. The fencing was in good repair, the road well maintained. Solar panels gleamed on the roof of what appeared to be a modern barn she couldn't see from the gate. Most telling of all, tire tracks crisscrossed the driveway, recent ones. The main house sat on a rise overlooking the valley, a sprawling log structure that managed to look both rustic and sophisticated. Maya climbed the porch steps, noting the security cameras mounted at strategic points. For an abandoned property, it was remarkably well monitored. The front door was solid oak, fitted with locks that looked military-grade. Maya fumbled with the keyring the lawyer had given her, finally finding one that turned smoothly in the main deadbolt. The door swung open silently on well-oiled hinges. Inside, the house was immaculate. Dust sheets covered the furniture, but underneath, Maya could see quality pieces: leather sofas, handcrafted tables, walls lined with books, and what appeared to be scientific journals. The electricity was on, the refrigerator humming quietly in the kitchen. Someone had been maintaining this place, despite what the lawyers believed. On the kitchen counter, a manila envelope bore her name in her grandfather's careful handwriting. Maya's hands shook slightly as she opened it, extracting a single sheet of paper. "Maya," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've inherited more than you bargained for. I pray you'll forgive an old man for the burden I'm placing on your shoulders, but I had no choice. There was no one else I could trust." Maya sank into a kitchen chair, her grandfather's words swimming before her eyes. "What you'll discover here will challenge everything you think you know about conservation, about government, about the lengths some people will go to for profit. I've spent 30 years building something magnificent and dangerous. The animals you'll find are the last of their kinds, species the world believes extinct, bloodlines that represent humanity's final chance at redemption. Animals." Maya's mind raced back to the paw prints by the gate. There are people who've been searching for this place for decades. Pharmaceutical companies who see dollar signs in rare genetics, hunters who collect trophies others can only dream of, government agencies that would rather eliminate problems than solve them. I've kept them at bay through misdirection and careful planning, but my time has run out. The letter continued with coordinates to various locations on the property, warnings about approaching certain areas without proper preparation, and references to documents hidden in a safe behind the bookshelf. But Maya's attention snagged on the final paragraph. "You have a week, maybe less, before they come. The security system will hold them off temporarily, but not forever. Learn quickly, trust carefully, and remember, these creatures have survived extinction once. They won't go quietly into that darkness again." Outside, a sound unlike anything Maya had ever heard echoed across the valley, a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house, deep, primal, and definitely not native to Montana. Maya dropped the letter and ran to the window, scanning the tree line. Whatever was out there, it was big, wild, and according to her grandfather's letter, counting on her for survival. The silence that followed Dr. Chen's words stretched between them like a taut wire. Maya's mind raced, trying to process what she'd just heard. 200 animals, secret, decades. Her grandfather's weathered face flashed in her memory. Had there been signs she'd missed during their brief childhood visits? "I don't understand," she finally managed. "What kind of animals? Why the secrecy?" Dr. Chen glanced toward the ranch house, then back at her. "Your grandfather was part of something bigger than a simple veterinary practice. He was protecting species that certain people would prefer didn't exist anymore. Extinct species? Not extinct, but close enough that their continued existence would complicate some very profitable ventures." Dr. Chen's expression darkened. Oil drilling, mining, development projects, all much easier to approve when you can claim the endangered species that might block them are already gone. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana wind. "Are you saying people have been deliberately hiding these animals to prevent environmental protection laws?" "I'm saying your grandfather spent 40 years giving supposedly extinct animals a place to live and breed, while powerful people told the world they were gone forever." Dr. Chen stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And now that he's dead, those same people want to make sure their secret dies with him." The weight of inheritance suddenly felt crushing. Maya looked across the vast expanse of her grandfather's land with new eyes. Somewhere out there, hidden from view, were creatures that shouldn't exist according to official records. The responsibility was staggering. Dr. Chen hesitated. "Once you see them, there's no going back. You'll know what your grandfather knew, carry the burden he carried. These people I mentioned, they don't make idle threats." "What people exactly?" "Start with Meridian Industries. They've been buying up land all around this area for the past 5 years, claiming environmental surveys show no protected species. Hard to argue with surveys when the species in question are supposed to be extinct." Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. "Your grandfather received offers to sell this place every month. When he refused, the offers became threats." Maya's pulse quickened. "You think his heart attack wasn't natural? I think 68-year-old men in perfect health don't usually drop dead while feeding animals they've cared for their entire lives." Dr. Chen started walking toward a weathered ATV parked behind the house. "But I can't prove anything. That's why these animals need someone new to protect them. Someone Meridian doesn't know about yet." Following Dr. Chen to the ATV, Maya felt like she was stepping into someone else's life. 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been finding a new apartment in Seattle after her lease expired. Now she was apparently inheriting a wildlife sanctuary hiding animals from corporate assassins. "How many people know about this?" she asked, climbing onto the back of the ATV. "Fewer every year. Your grandfather was careful about who he trusted." Dr. Chen started the engine, the sound unnaturally loud in the vast silence. "There's me, obviously. Dr. Rodriguez comes up from Billings twice a month to help with medical care. A few others provide supplies, funding, transportation when we need to relocate animals." They drove past the main ranch buildings toward a cluster of hills that rose from the grassland like sleeping giants. Maya noticed the fencing was different here, taller, more sophisticated, with what looked like electric deterrents along the top. "The first enclosure is just ahead," Dr. Chen called over the engine noise. "Home to a family of Mexican gray wolves. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the last wild Mexican wolf died in 1980. Maya's breath caught as they crested a small rise. Below them stretched a natural valley, hidden between the hills, enclosed by carefully camouflaged fencing. At first, she saw nothing but grass and scattered trees. Then movement caught her eye, a flash of grey near a cluster of rocks. Dr. Chen stopped the ATV and pointed. "There. 3 adults and 2 juveniles. We've had successful breeding here for 12 years. The wolf that emerged from behind the rocks was magnificent, larger than Maya had expected, with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to assess her from across the distance. It moved with liquid grace, alert but unafraid. "My God," Maya whispered. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Wait until you see the cats." As if responding to some invisible signal, 2 more wolves appeared, followed by what were clearly juveniles, smaller, more playful, tumbling over each other as they explored their territory. Maya felt tears she hadn't expected burning her eyes. These creatures were supposed to be gone forever, yet here they were, alive and thriving in secret. "How did he do it?" she asked. "How did my grandfather keep this hidden for so long?" Dr. Chen's expression grew somber, very carefully, and at considerable personal cost. She restarted the ATV. "Come on, you need to see everything before we discuss what happens next. Because Maya, like it or not, these animals are yours now, and Meridian Industries is going to come calling very soon." The coffee had gone cold in Maya's hands as she stared at the sprawling enclosures stretching across what she'd assumed was empty pasture land. Her grandfather's property extended far beyond what she could see from the main house, and apparently every acre served a purpose she'd never imagined. "This is impossible," she whispered, watching a pair of snow leopards pad silently across a rocky outcropping. "How did he keep this secret?" Thomas moved beside her, his weathered hands gripping the wooden railing of the observation platform. "Your grandfather was a careful man. 30 years of careful planning, careful selection of who to trust. His eyes found hers. The question now is whether you can be trusted." Something like that. Thomas gestured toward a distant enclosure where Maya could make out the distinctive silhouette of what looked suspiciously like a rhinoceros. "These animals come from all over the world. Some were rescued from poachers, others from illegal trade operations. A few—" he paused, choosing his words carefully. "A few were taken from situations where their existence had become inconvenient for certain parties." The implications of his words sent a chill down Maya's spine. Inconvenient how? What was that? "Stay here." Thomas was already moving, speaking into the radio in low, urgent tones. Maya caught fragments: perimeter, breach, and how many vehicles? Her heart hammered as she scanned the landscape, suddenly aware of how exposed they were on the platform. In the distance, beyond the tree line that bordered the northern edge of the property, she could see dust clouds rising. Thomas returned, his face grim. "We need to move. Now." "What's happening?" "Company. The kind your grandfather spent 30 years avoiding." He was already leading her down from the platform, moving with surprising speed for a man his age. "There's a protocol for this. Underground tunnels connect most of the facilities. We can monitor the situation from the command center." Maya's legs felt unsteady as they hurried along a path that wound between enclosures. The animals seemed to sense the tension. Many had retreated to the far edges of their spaces, while others paced restlessly. A magnificent Siberian tiger watched their passage, with intelligent amber eyes that seemed almost knowing. Command center? The underground corridor was wider than Maya had expected, well lit and clearly designed for regular use. As they walked, Thomas explained in hurried whispers. "The ranch sits on a natural cave system. Your grandfather expanded it over the years, created a whole network. Climate-controlled storage, medical facilities, emergency protocols. He knew that someday someone would come looking." They emerged into a room that looked like something from a high-tech security firm. Multiple monitors showed feeds from cameras positioned throughout the property. Maya could see the enclosures from various angles, but also approaches to the ranch that she hadn't known existed. On the largest monitor, 3 black SUVs were visible, moving steadily along the main access road. "Who are they?" Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Thomas was busy at a control panel, his fingers flying over switches and buttons. Could be fish and wildlife, though they usually call ahead. Could be federal agents following up on old leads. He paused, meeting her eyes. "Could be the people who killed your parents." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. What? The car accident 23 years ago. Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. Your grandfather never believed it was random. Your father was asking too many questions about the family business, getting too close to understanding what was really happening here. Maya gripped the edge of the control console, her knuckles white. You're saying they were murdered because of this place? I'm saying your grandfather had good reason to keep you away, and now you're here, and so are they. He pointed to the monitors, where the vehicles had stopped at the main gate. Men in dark clothing were examining the lock, one speaking into a radio. What do they want? Proof, evidence. Or maybe they just want to make sure the secret dies with the last person who knows it. Thomas began flipping switches, and Maya watched as heavy barriers began sliding into place over various enclosure entrances. The animals will be secure, but we need to decide what you're going to do. What do you mean? I mean, you have about 10 minutes to choose whether you're going to run, hide, or fight. Maya stared at the monitors, watching armed strangers invade the only legacy her grandfather had left her. Something fierce and unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Tell me how to fight. The compound stretched before Maya like a secret world carved from the Montana wilderness. What had looked like a modest collection of outbuildings from the ranch house revealed itself as something far more elaborate, a carefully planned facility that must have taken decades to construct. Dr. Chen led her down a gravel path that wound between structures designed to blend seamlessly with the landscape. The buildings varied in size, from barn-like structures to smaller, specialized enclosures, all connected by an intricate network of paths and what appeared to be underground tunnels. Your grandfather was methodical, Chen explained, pulling a tablet from her jacket. Every animal here was rescued from situations where conventional sanctuaries couldn't help, either because the species was too rare, too dangerous, or because the political situation made official channels impossible. They stopped at the first enclosure, and Maya's breath caught in her throat. Behind reinforced glass that had been tinted to look like natural rock, a massive Siberian tiger paced with fluid grace. The cat's orange and black stripes seemed to glow against the carefully recreated tiger environment, complete with fallen logs and a small waterfall. Dmitri, Chen said softly, rescued from a private collector in Russia who was using him for illegal breeding operations. He would have been killed when authorities raided the facility, too aggressive for relocation, they said. Your grandfather spent 2 years and considerable resources getting him here safely. Maya pressed her palm against the glass, mesmerized by the tiger's powerful movements. How many people know about this place? Until yesterday, exactly 7. Now it's 6, plus you. Chen's voice carried a weight that made Maya turn from the tiger. Your grandfather trusted very few people, and for good reason. What we're doing here, it's not exactly illegal, but it exists in gray areas that certain people prefer to keep buried. They moved to the next enclosure, where a family of snow leopards lounged on artificial rocky outcroppings. The cats' pale, spotted coats blended perfectly with their environment, and Maya could see how someone might walk past without noticing them at all. The camouflage isn't just for the animals' comfort, Chen continued, following Maya's gaze. Satellite imagery, aerial surveys, even casual flyovers, everything here is designed to look like ordinary ranch buildings and natural landscape features. A movement in the trees beyond the snow leopards caught Maya's attention. Something large and dark shifted between the branches, and she squinted to make it out. Ah, you spotted Echo, Chen smiled, pulling up something on her tablet. Bornean orangutan, incredibly intelligent and, unfortunately, very good at escaping. We've had to modify his enclosure 3 times. As if responding to his name, a reddish-brown ape swung into view, regarding Maya with curious dark eyes. He was larger than she'd expected, his long arms moving with surprising grace as he navigated the elaborate network of ropes and platforms that extended high into the canopy. Echo's story is particularly troubling, Chen said, her expression darkening. He was part of an illegal trafficking operation that your grandfather helped expose. The problem is, some very powerful people were involved in that operation, and they're not happy that it was shut down. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana air. What kind of powerful people? Chen glanced around, then lowered her voice. The kind who view exotic animals as commodities, status symbols for private collectors, ingredients for traditional medicine, entertainment for underground fighting rings. There's more money in illegal wildlife trafficking than most people realize, billions of dollars annually. They continued walking, passing enclosures that housed creatures Maya had only seen in documentaries. A pair of Amur leopards played in an elaborately constructed forest habitat. 3 black rhinos grazed in what looked like an African savanna, complete with acacia trees and termite mounds. Each environment was so carefully crafted that Maya began to understand the true scope of what her grandfather had built. The ranch covers 8,000 acres, Chen explained, but the sanctuary uses less than 1/10 of that. The rest provides a natural buffer zone and helps maintain the illusion that this is just a working cattle ranch. They climbed a small hill that offered a panoramic view of the entire facility. From this vantage point, Maya could see the genius of her grandfather's design. The enclosures flowed naturally into the landscape, many partially underground or built into hillsides. Solar panels had been disguised as barn roofing, and the paths between enclosures looked like natural game trails. "This must have cost millions," Maya said. "Closer to tens of millions over the decades he was building it." Chen's expression grew serious. "Which brings us to the problem we're facing now. Your grandfather's funding came from several sources, some of which are complicated. With his death, certain parties are demanding immediate repayment of debts, while others are pressuring us to transfer specific animals to their facilities." Maya turned to face Chen fully. "And if we can't pay? If we have to give up the animals?" The veterinarian's silence was answer enough. In the distance, Dimitri's roar echoed across the compound, a sound both magnificent and heartbreaking. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound as Maya stood before the tiger enclosure, her grandfather's journal clutched in her trembling hands. The pages she'd read the night before had shattered everything she thought she knew about Harold Brennan. Her grandfather, the quiet rancher who taught her to ride horses and braid rope, had been running an underground railroad for endangered animals. "Project Sanctuary," she whispered, reading the faded ink on the journal's first page. "Acquisition, protection, and preservation of genetically viable specimens threatened by poaching, habitat destruction, and political instability." The Bengal tiger, whom her grandfather had named Rajesh, padded silently to the fence line. His amber eyes seemed to study her with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. According to the journal, Rajesh had been rescued from a tiger farm in Thailand, destined for the black market organ trade. A rustling in the nearby bushes made Maya spin around. Dr. Chen emerged from the snow leopard habitat, her veterinary bag slung over her shoulder and concern etched across her face. "You found Harold's records," Chen said, noticing the journal. It wasn't a question. "How long have you known?" Maya's voice carried an edge she didn't recognize in herself. Maya flipped through pages filled with her grandfather's meticulous handwriting. Routes through Mexico, contact names in 6 countries, veterinary protocols, financial records showing massive expenditures disguised as ranch maintenance. Some elements within Fish and Wildlife have been tracking Harold's operation for years, Chen finally admitted. But it's complicated. Officially, what he was doing was illegal, importing endangered species without permits, maintaining unlicensed facilities. Unofficially, he saved dozens of species from extinction. A distant rumble made them both freeze. Maya recognized the sound, vehicles approaching the main road, multiple engines moving fast. "We need to hide these," Chen said, reaching for the journal, but Maya pulled it away. "No more hiding. I need to understand what I've inherited." The rumble grew louder. Through the trees, Maya caught glimpses of black SUVs turning onto the ranch's private road. Her stomach dropped as she counted them, at least 4 vehicles moving in formation. "The safe house," Chen said urgently. "Harold built a bunker beneath the equipment barn. We can—" "No." Maya's voice surprised her with its steadiness. "Running makes us look guilty. Maya, you don't understand the forces at play here. There are people who would kill to control what your grandfather built. The genetic material alone is worth millions on the black market." The vehicles drew closer, their engines echoing off the mountain walls. Maya thought of Rajesh, of the snow leopards, of the dozens of other animals whose existence had been kept secret for decades. Her grandfather had risked everything to protect them. The least she could do was face whatever came next. "Then we make sure they can't get to the animals," Maya said. She turned to Chen, decision crystallizing in her mind. "You said there are officials who support what grandfather did. Who can we trust?" "Director Sarah Walsh at Fish and Wildlife. She's been protecting Harold's operation from the inside for years." "But Maya, if these are Morrison's people, they're not here to talk." The first SUV crested the hill, followed by 3 others. They moved with military precision, positioning themselves to block all exits from the compound. Maya noticed the vehicles bore no government markings. "Those aren't federal agents," she said. Chen paled. "Corporate. Maya, we need to leave. Now." But Maya was already moving, not toward escape, but deeper into the compound. She sprinted toward the main control building where her grandfather had installed the security systems. If these people wanted the animals, they'd have to go through every electronic barrier Harold Brennan had spent 2 decades perfecting. Behind her, Chen shouted her name, but Maya didn't slow down. The journal bounced against her chest as she ran, its weight both burden and armor. Her grandfather's words echoed in her memory from a page she'd read at dawn. "The hardest choices require the strongest wills. These animals have no voice but ours, no protection but what we provide. We are their last hope." Car doors slammed in rapid succession, voices barked orders in clipped professional tones. Maya reached the control building and slammed her palm against the biometric scanner her grandfather had installed. The heavy door clicked open just as the first armed figures appeared at the compound's entrance. She was no longer just Harold Brennan's granddaughter inheriting a ranch. She was the guardian of secrets that powerful people would kill to possess. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch as Maya stood at the kitchen window, watching Dr. Elena Vasquez's dusty pickup truck disappear down the dirt road. The veterinarian's parting words echoed in her mind. "Trust no one else with this knowledge, not yet." Maya poured herself another cup of coffee, her hands still trembling slightly from the revelation that she was now guardian to creatures that shouldn't exist in Montana, or perhaps anywhere. The Przewalski's horses alone were worth millions, but the implications went far beyond money. Her grandfather had been running an illegal wildlife sanctuary, and now she was complicit in whatever conspiracy had kept it hidden for decades. A sharp knock at the front door made her jump, coffee sloshing over the rim of her mug. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a crisp uniform, fish, wildlife and parks, according to the embroidered patch on his chest. Her blood turned to ice. Maya Chen? The officer was young, maybe early 30s, with the kind of earnest face that belonged on recruitment posters. "I'm Officer Jake Morrison, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your grandfather's property." Maya's mind raced as she opened the door, keeping her expression neutral. "Of course. Though I have to say, I'm still getting oriented here myself. Just inherited the place last week." Morrison nodded sympathetically. "I understand this is a difficult time. We've had some reports of unusual animal sightings in this area over the years, neighbors claiming to see species that shouldn't be here. I'm conducting follow-up investigations on several properties." "What kind of species?" Maya asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Oh, you know how it is with rural communities. People claim they've seen everything from exotic birds to big cats." Morrison's smile was disarming, but his eyes were sharp, cataloguing every detail of her reaction. "Mind if I take a look around? Just a routine inspection." Every instinct screamed at Maya to refuse, but she knew that would only raise suspicions. "Sure, though there's not much to see. My grandfather mostly raised cattle." The lie came easier than it should have. They walked toward the main barn, Maya's heart hammering with each step. She'd spent the early morning hours with Elena, moving the most conspicuous animals to the hidden facility deeper in the property. But had they moved everything? She couldn't remember if the capybaras were still in the smaller enclosure behind the equipment shed. "Your grandfather was quite the character," Morrison said conversationally. "Samuel Chen, right? People in town said he was private. He valued his solitude," Maya replied carefully. "Didn't much care for visitors." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya met his gaze directly. "Sometimes people who've lived alone for 20 years just want to be left alone." Inside the barn, Maya held her breath as Morrison's flashlight beam swept across the seemingly ordinary stalls. Elena had done her work well. The space looked like any working ranch barn, complete with hay bales, riding equipment, and the lingering scent of horses. Normal horses. "These stalls look well maintained for someone who supposedly only raised cattle," Morrison observed. "Grandpa had a few horses for working the herd," Maya said. "I sold them last week to a neighbor." It was another lie, but a plausible one. Morrison made a note in his small notebook, and Maya tried not to think about what would happen if he demanded to see the bill of sale. They continued the tour for another 30 minutes, Morrison asking casual questions that felt anything but casual. Maya found herself constructing an increasingly elaborate fictional version of her grandfather's life, each lie requiring 3 more to support it. Morrison sighed and spoke into his radio. "Copy that. En route." He turned back to Maya. "Duty calls." "Thanks for your time, Miss Chen." "Of course. Hope you find what you're looking for." Morrison paused beside his truck, studying her face one more time. "You know, if you ever do come across anything unusual out here, exotic animals, strange tracks, anything like that, you should call it in immediately. There are strict federal laws about harboring non-native species. I'll keep that in mind." As his truck disappeared down the road, Maya sank onto the porch steps, adrenaline finally catching up with her. She'd passed the test, but barely, and Morrison would be back. She was certain of that. Maya grabbed her keys and ran toward her truck, her grandfather's secret weighing heavier with each passing hour. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound as Maya stood beside Dr. Chen, watching him examine a magnificent snow leopard through the reinforced glass of its enclosure. The big cat moved with liquid grace, its pale eyes tracking their every movement with intelligent wariness. Maya studied the leopard's powerful form, noting the way she favored her left rear leg slightly. What happened to her? Declawed, defanged. The collector wanted a safe pet for his children. Chen's voice carried barely controlled fury. It took months of surgery and rehabilitation to give her any quality of life back. She'll never survive in the wild, but here. He smiled as Arya approached the glass, pressing her forehead against it near his hand. Here she has dignity. They moved through the compound systematically, Chen sharing the history of each rescue. The Bengal tigers from a bankrupt circus, the pack of Mexican wolves saved from an illegal breeding operation. Each story painted a picture of her grandfather she'd never known, a man who spent his fortune and risked his freedom to give these creatures sanctuary. "The network spans 3 continents, Chen explained as they paused beside an enclosure housing a family of endangered Bornean orangutans. Wildlife traffickers, corrupt officials, private collectors who treat exotic animals like living trophies. Your grandfather spent decades building relationships with conservationists, veterinarians, even reformed smugglers who wanted to make amends." Maya watched the orangutan matriarch swing effortlessly through the elaborate climbing structure, her infant clinging to her chest. "How many people know about this place?" "Perhaps 24 worldwide. Most have never been here. They just know to call when they have an animal that needs to disappear from the wrong hands." Chen's expression darkened. But our secrecy has been compromised. 3 weeks ago, one of our contacts in Singapore went missing after intercepting a shipment of pangolins. Last week, a veterinarian in Johannesburg who'd helped us extract injured rhinos was found dead in his clinic. A chill ran down Maya's spine. You think someone's hunting the network? I'm certain of it, and now they know about this place. Chen pulled out his phone, showing her a series of satellite images. These were taken 2 days ago. See those tire tracks leading to the old mining road? Someone's been conducting surveillance. Maya studied the images, her mind racing. The tracks were clearly visible, cutting through the wilderness in a deliberate pattern that suggested professional reconnaissance. Why didn't you tell me this yesterday? I needed to be sure you were committed to protecting this place before I revealed how much danger you're truly in. Chen's eyes met hers. Your grandfather died because he refused to give up the location of certain animals, specifically a breeding pair of Javan rhinos that we rescued from Indonesian poachers 6 months ago. Javan rhinos? Maya's knowledge of endangered species was limited, but even she recognized that name. Fewer than 70 left in the wild. These two represent hope for the species' survival, or a fortune to the right buyer. Chen led her toward a heavily secured section of the compound she hadn't seen yet. A private collector in Eastern Europe has offered $50 million for a breeding pair. When your grandfather refused to negotiate, they escalated their methods. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Her grandfather hadn't died in some random accident or from natural causes. He'd been murdered for refusing to sell out the animals he'd devoted his life to protecting. Who are they? She asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar, but the words made her blood run cold. We know you're there. 48 hours to consider our offer. Don't make your grandfather's mistake. Chen read the message over her shoulder and cursed in Mandarin. They're moving faster than I anticipated. What offer? Maya demanded, though part of her already knew. The same one they made to your grandfather. 50 million for the rhinos, and they'll leave the rest of the sanctuary alone. Chen's expression was grim. It's not really an offer, Maya. It's an ultimatum. Maya looked around at the compound, at the animals who depended on this place for their very survival, at the legacy her grandfather had built through decades of sacrifice. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a mantle she'd never asked to wear. Show me the rhinos, she said quietly. The encrypted files from her grandfather's computer kept Maya awake until dawn, their contents more disturbing than she'd imagined possible. As pale morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, she rubbed her burning eyes and stared at the damning evidence spread across the table: shipping manifests, veterinary records, and financial transactions that painted a picture of an international smuggling operation spanning 3 decades. Her grandfather hadn't just been protecting animals, he'd been stealing them. The sound of gravel crunching in the driveway sent her heart hammering. Maya quickly gathered the papers, shoving them into a manila folder as headlights swept across the windows. Through the curtains, she watched a black SUV pull up beside the barn, its occupants hidden behind tinted glass. She'd expected them to come eventually, but not this soon. Maya slipped out the back door, the folder clutched against her chest as she made her way toward the hidden enclosures. The morning air carried the scent of pine and the distant calls of her grandfather's impossible menagerie. Whatever else he'd done, whatever crimes he'd committed, these animals were innocent. They needed her protection now. The white tiger, Sasha, lifted her massive head as Maya approached the reinforced habitat. Even through the specialized fencing, the cat's presence was overwhelming, a magnificent predator that shouldn't exist in Montana's wilderness, yet somehow thrived under her grandfather's care. The veterinary records indicated Sasha had been acquired from a private collector in Dubai 15 years ago, supposedly rescued from deplorable conditions. But the shipping documents told a different story. Maya Chen? She spun around to find a woman in an expensive suit standing 20 feet away, flanked by 2 men who looked more like soldiers than government officials. The woman's smile was perfectly calculated, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the coldness in her pale blue eyes. "I'm Director Sarah Voss, Department of Fish and Wildlife Services." She held up a badge that caught the morning sunlight. "We need to discuss your grandfather's property." Maya's grip tightened on the folder. "I wasn't aware the Fish and Wildlife Service made house calls at 6 in the morning. Special circumstances require special protocols." Voss stepped closer, her heels clicking on the concrete pathway that led between the enclosures. "Your grandfather was involved in some very serious illegal activities that put both wildlife and national security at risk." Voss's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You'd be surprised how closely those two things can be related. Some of the specimens your grandfather harbored were more than just exotic pets. They were part of a biological research program that was shut down for very good reasons." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. She thought about the strange marking system in her grandfather's notes, the way certain animals were designated with codes rather than names. The Sumatran orangutan, Coda, whose intelligence seemed almost unsettling. The pair of Arctic wolves whose behavior patterns defied everything she knew about the species. "What kind of research?" she asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. "The classified kind." One of Voss's companions had moved to flank Maya's left side while they talked, cutting off her escape route toward the main compound. The kind that requires immediate containment and disposal of all related materials. Disposal. Maya's voice came out as a whisper. "You mean you're going to kill them?" "We're going to clean up a mess that should have been handled decades ago." Voss extended her hand toward the folder. "Starting with those documents you're holding, my associates conducted a preliminary search of your grandfather's house this morning. We know what you found." Maya took a step backward, her mind racing. If they'd already been inside the house, they knew about the computer, the hidden safe, everything. But they were still here, still negotiating, which meant they needed something from her. "The animals are protected by a conservation trust," she said, grasping for time. "Legal paperwork was filed with the state. You can't just—" Behind them, Sasha let out a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground. The magnificent cat had risen to her feet, her amber eyes fixed on the intruders with predatory intensity. Maya realized that the tiger wasn't just reacting to strangers. She was responding to a threat against someone she'd learned to trust. "I need to see warrants," Maya said, backing toward Sasha's enclosure. "Legal documentation. You can't just show up and—" The sharp crack of a tranquilizer gun cut her words short as one of Voss's men raised his weapon toward the tiger. The encrypted files Marcus had recovered painted a picture more sinister than Maya could have imagined. Sitting in the ranch house kitchen at 3 in the morning, surrounded by printouts and her grandfather's journals, she felt the weight of decades of secrets pressing down on her shoulders. "Project Lazarus," she whispered, tracing her finger along a government document dated 15 years ago. The letterhead bore the seal of a pharmaceutical company she'd never heard of, Meridian Biosystems. But the signatures at the bottom made her blood run cold. Senator Patricia Whitmore, the woman currently campaigning for re-election on an environmental protection platform. Marcus looked up from his laptop, dark circles under his eyes. "It gets worse. Look at this." He turned the screen toward her, revealing a series of financial transfers. "Your grandfather wasn't just hiding animals, Maya. He was protecting evidence of illegal genetic experiments. These creatures, some of them aren't just exotic, they're engineered." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. She thought about Coda, the wolf hybrid whose intelligence seemed almost human, about the birds whose coloring defied natural explanation. My grandfather was a whistleblower? More than that. According to these files, he was the lead geneticist on Project Lazarus before he disappeared with half their research and a significant portion of their test subjects. Marcus scrolled through more documents. The project was supposed to develop enhanced livestock for military applications, disease resistance, increased nutritional value, accelerated growth rates. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for her grandfather's journal from 2009. His handwriting, usually neat and precise, became increasingly erratic as the entries progressed. They want to weaponize what we've created. The board meeting today made it clear they're not interested in feeding the hungry or helping farmers. They want biological warfare capabilities. I've seen what happens to the failures, the animals that don't meet specifications. I won't be party to this anymore. A low growl from outside made them both freeze. Maya moved to the window, peering through the blinds into the darkness. Two sets of headlights were moving slowly up the access road, their beams cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. "We have company," she whispered. Marcus was already shutting down his laptop and gathering the most crucial documents. "Back exit?" Maya nodded toward the kitchen door that led to the rear of the property, but as they prepared to leave, she realized something that made her stomach drop. The animals. If these people are willing to kill to keep this secret, they won't hesitate to eliminate the evidence. "Maya, we need to go, now." She was already moving toward the gun cabinet, her grandfather's words echoing in her mind. Sometimes protecting what matters means taking risks others won't understand. She grabbed the rifle and a box of ammunition, her hands steadier than she felt. The vehicles had stopped near the main barn. Through the window, she could see 4 figures in dark clothing moving with military precision, spreading out to surround the house. These weren't the same people who had confronted her and Jake days ago. These were professionals. "The emergency protocol," Maya said suddenly, remembering something from her grandfather's notes. She rushed to his desk and found the hand-drawn map she'd noticed before but hadn't fully understood. He built escape routes for the animals. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Maya, we can worry about the animals later. Right now." The front door exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Maya didn't hesitate. She fired 2 shots through the kitchen doorway, not aiming to kill but to buy time. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, and she heard shouting from the front of the house. They burst through the back door into the cold Montana night. Maya's breath came in visible puffs as they ran toward the tree line, but instead of heading for the woods, she veered toward the large enclosure where Coda and his pack were housed. "What are you doing?" Marcus hissed. "Something my grandfather would have done." She reached the enclosure and began working the complex lock system. The wolves were already agitated, sensing danger. When the gate opened, Coda emerged first, his intelligent eyes meeting Maya's for a moment that felt like understanding passing between them. "Go," she whispered. "All of you, go." The pack disappeared into the darkness, just as flashlight beams began sweeping the area behind them. Maya and Marcus reached the woods as shouts erupted from near the house. She could hear vehicles starting up, the sound of radios crackling with urgent communications. Hidden among the pine trees, Maya watched as lights blazed throughout the property she'd called home for barely a week. The people searching for them moved with purpose, clearly familiar with tactical operations, but they didn't know the land like her grandfather had taught her to know it in their brief time together through his journals and maps. "There's a cabin," she told Marcus, consulting the map by moonlight, "about 3 miles north, off the grid, stocked with supplies. My grandfather prepared for this day." As they began moving deeper into the wilderness, Maya understood that her inheritance was far more than land and animals. She'd inherited a war that had been fought in shadows for years, and now it was her turn to carry the torch her grandfather had lit. The encrypted files on her grandfather's computer painted a picture Maya could barely comprehend. She sat hunched over the desk in his study, her coffee long cold as dawn light crept through the dusty windows. Page after page of coded communications revealed a network spanning continents, veterinarians, wildlife researchers, government officials, all connected by a single purpose that had cost some of them their lives. Dr. Chen knocked softly before entering. "You've been up all night. Look at this." Maya turned the screen toward him. My grandfather wasn't just hiding animals, he was running an underground railroad for creatures that weren't supposed to exist anymore. The veterinarian adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents. "These coordinates, they're all over the world," Madagascar, the Amazon, Siberia, and people have been dying for it. Maya pulled up another file. Dr. Sarah Holbrook, wildlife geneticist, car accident in Oregon 2019. Dr. Marcus Webb, conservation biologist, drowning in Costa Rica 2020. Professor Elena Vasquez, extinct species specialist, hiking accident in Chile 2021. Accidents, Dr. Chen said quietly. Too many accidents. Maya's finger traced the screen. They were all part of this network. They all had access to animals that science says are extinct. A sharp whistle from outside made them both freeze. It was Marcus, the signal they'd agreed on if anyone approached the ranch. Maya quickly closed the files and moved to the window. A black SUV was making its way up the dirt road, dust billowing behind it. Same vehicle from yesterday, Dr. Chen observed. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, two men, armed, taking positions around property. Nothing's going to happen. Dr. Chen. Maya grabbed his shoulders. These people killed my grandfather. They've killed others. You need to understand what we're dealing with. The veterinarian's face had gone pale, but he nodded. What do you want me to do? Take this. She pressed the USB drive into his hands. There's a back trail through the woods that leads to the old logging road. Your truck. I'm not leaving you here alone. You're not. Marcus is here, and we know this property better than they do. Maya moved to her grandfather's gun cabinet, her fingers trembling as she worked the combination. But someone needs to survive this. Someone needs to make sure the world knows what's been happening here. The sound of car doors slamming echoed across the yard. Maya peered through the curtains and saw two men in dark suits approaching the house. One spoke into a radio, while the other scanned the outbuildings with practiced eyes. Go, Maya whispered. Now. Dr. Chen hesitated, then squeezed her hand. Your grandfather would be proud of you. The knock on the front door was polite but insistent. Maya took a deep breath, hid the rifle behind the door and opened it. Ms. Rivera? The taller man flashed a badge too quickly for her to read properly. Agent Thompson, Fish and Wildlife Service. We've received reports of illegal animal trafficking on this property. I wasn't aware Fish and Wildlife worked in pairs with concealed weapons, Maya said, noting the bulge under the shorter man's jacket. Agent Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. We take trafficking very seriously, especially when it involves endangered species. You're welcome to look around. As you can see, this is a cattle ranch. Maya gestured toward the visible pastures where a few head of perfectly ordinary cattle grazed peacefully. Marcus had moved them into view that morning, part of their preparation for exactly this scenario. We'd like to search the outbuildings. Do you have a warrant? We can get one. Then, I suggest you do that. Maya started to close the door, but the shorter man stepped forward, his foot blocking it. Miss Rivera, we know your grandfather was involved in some questionable activities. We're prepared to offer you immunity in exchange for cooperation. Immunity from what? Running a legitimate ranch? Thompson's facade finally cracked. We know about the animals. We know about the network. Your grandfather's dead, but you don't have to follow him. The words hit Maya like a physical blow, confirming what she'd already suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. You killed him. Your grandfather had a heart attack. After you threatened him. Thompson stepped closer, and Maya caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something metallic. Ms. Rivera, you're in possession of biological assets that pose a significant security risk. We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. Maya's hand found the rifle's stock behind the door. I choose option 3. The satellite phone's shrill ring cut through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. Maya's eyes snapped open, her heart already racing as she fumbled for the device on the nightstand. The display showed an unknown number, but at 4 in the morning, unknown meant dangerous. Maya Chen, she whispered, slipping out of bed to avoid waking Sarah, who had finally fallen asleep after their grueling planning session. You have something that belongs to us. The voice was mechanically distorted, impossible to identify. Return it. and no one gets hurt. Maya's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about. The Siberian cubs. Dr. Petrov's final shipment. We know you have them. The line went dead before Maya could respond. She stared at the phone, her hands trembling. The cubs, two impossibly rare Siberian tiger cubs that had arrived 3 days ago in the final transport. Dr. Petrov had arranged before his death. She'd barely had time to process their presence among the other rescued animals, but apparently someone had been watching, waiting. She dressed quickly and made her way to the main compound, where the emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the paths. The cubs were housed in a specialized enclosure near the medical facility, too young to be with the adult tigers, but requiring constant monitoring. As she approached, she could hear their soft, mewling calls. Couldn't sleep either. Maya spun around to find Marcus emerging from the shadows, a rifle slung across his shoulder. His weathered face looked grim in the pale light. Someone just called about the cubs, she said. They want them back. Marcus's expression darkened. Figured this day would come. Your grandfather and Petrov, they knew these cubs were special, last of their genetic line, bred from tigers that were supposed to be extinct decades ago. What do you mean, supposed to be extinct? Government project back in the 70s. Soviet Union was experimenting with preserving genetic material from endangered species, but officially shut it down when international pressure mounted. Unofficially, Marcus shrugged. Money talks. There are people who'd pay millions for those cubs, and others who'd kill to make sure they never see daylight. Maya felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her shoulders. Every day seemed to reveal another layer of her grandfather's secret world, another impossible decision she wasn't prepared to make. We need to move them, she said. If someone knows they're here. The sound of engines approaching made them both freeze. Multiple vehicles, moving fast across the rough terrain toward the ranch. Marcus immediately unslung his rifle, checking the chamber. Get to the safe room, he ordered. Radio Jake and tell him we have company. But Maya was already running toward the cubs' enclosure. She couldn't abandon them, not when they were helpless and completely dependent on her protection. The enclosure's security system required her biometric scan to open, another of her grandfather's precautions that now seemed prophetic. The cubs mewed anxiously as she entered, their golden eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. They were beautiful beyond description, their coats already showing the distinctive markings that would make them magnificent adults if they lived that long. I know, babies, she whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. We're going to get you somewhere safe. The mobile transport cage was designed for exactly this scenario. Maya had practiced the procedure with Jake dozens of times, but never imagined she'd need it under these circumstances. The cubs protested as she gently guided them into the padded compartment, but they were still young enough to be manageable. Gunshots echoed across the compound, sharp cracks that sent adrenaline surging through Maya's system. Marcus was buying her time, but she had no idea how long his delaying tactics would work. The underground tunnel system her grandfather had built was accessible through a hidden panel in the medical facility. Maya had discovered it only a week ago during Jake's security briefing, a network of passages that connected key buildings and led to emergency exits scattered across the property. As she maneuvered the transport cage through the narrow tunnel, her headlamp illuminating rough-hewn walls, she could hear voices above, strangers moving through the compound, their footsteps heavy and purposeful. Where are they? A man's voice demanded, muffled by the earth above. Don't know what you're talking about, came Marcus's defiant reply. The sound of a struggle followed, then silence that made Maya's stomach clench with fear. She forced herself to keep moving, following the tunnel toward the eastern emergency exit that would put her near the old mining road. The cubs had gone quiet, sensing her tension. When she finally emerged from the underground passage, dawn was breaking over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, she could see smoke rising from the direction of the main compound. Maya pulled out her satellite phone with shaking fingers. There was only one person who might be able to help now, one connection her grandfather had trusted above all others. She dialed the emergency number Jake had given her, praying Dr. Elena Vasquez would answer. The emergency meeting convened in the main barn as dawn broke over the mountains, casting long shadows through the wooden slats. Maya stood before a circle of faces, some familiar, others she was meeting for the first time. Dr. Chen had made good on his promise, bringing 3 other researchers who'd been quietly documenting species they weren't supposed to know existed. "The situation is worse than we thought," Dr. Sarah Petrov announced, her laptop balanced precariously on a hay bale. The wildlife geneticist had arrived from Colorado in the middle of the night, her car packed with mobile DNA sequencing equipment. "I've been tracking similar disappearances across 7 states, research facilities, private sanctuaries, even some zoos, animals vanishing without explanation." Maya felt Marcus tense beside her. They'd spent the remaining hours before dawn moving the most vulnerable animals to deeper hiding spots, but she knew it was temporary at best. The sound of helicopters had returned twice during the night, circling but not landing. "Show them the footage," Dr. Chen urged. Petrov clicked through security camera stills on her screen. Maya's blood chilled as she recognized the same black vehicles that had been haunting her ranch, parked outside facilities from Montana to New Mexico. In several images, she could make out figures in tactical gear loading crates onto trucks. "This is Elena Vasquez," Petrov continued, indicating a woman who introduced herself as a former fish and wildlife investigator. "She's been tracking the financial trail." Elena stepped forward, her weathered face grim. "Shell companies, all of them. But they lead back to something called the Cerberus Collective, private military contractors with ties to biotech firms, pharmaceutical companies, and some very wealthy collectors who don't ask questions about provenance." "Collectors?" Maya's voice cracked. "The exotic pet trade is worth billions," Elena explained. "But that's just the surface. Some of these animals, especially the ones showing unusual genetic markers, they're worth more as research subjects, or worse, as raw materials." Maya thought of Coda's impossible silver coat, of the way the snow leopards seemed to understand human speech, of dozens of other small anomalies she'd noticed but hadn't dared to question. Her grandfather's journals had hinted at selective breeding programs, but she was beginning to realize the scope was far beyond anything she'd imagined. "There's something else," Marcus said quietly. He'd been standing guard by the window, but now he turned to face the group. "I think they're planning to move tonight." He described what he'd observed during his reconnaissance mission: increased radio chatter, supply trucks moving toward the valley, and most troubling of all, personnel setting up what looked like a staging area in the abandoned mining camp 5 miles north. "We have maybe 12 hours, he concluded. The weight of impossible decisions settled on Maya's shoulders. Looking around at these people who'd risked everything to help animals they'd never met, she felt the full burden of her inheritance. This wasn't just about the ranch anymore. It was about every facility being raided, every researcher being silenced, every animal disappearing into the dark network Elena had described. "What about going public?" asked Dr. Martin Webb, a veterinarian who'd driven down from Glacier National Park. "Media exposure could get everyone killed," Elena interrupted. "I tried that route 3 years ago when I first stumbled onto this, lost my job, my credibility, and nearly lost my life. These people have reach you can't imagine." Maya closed her eyes, hearing her grandfather's voice in her memory. "Sometimes the only way to win is to change the rules of the game entirely." When she opened them, her decision was made. "We evacuate," she announced. Not just a few animals, all of them. The barn fell silent, except for the distant call of a hawk overhead. "Maya," Dr. Chen said gently, "we're talking about moving 200 animals across wilderness terrain with limited resources and hostile forces actively hunting them. It's logistically impossible." "My grandfather moved them here once," Maya replied, her voice growing stronger. "Hidden transport routes, safe houses, people willing to risk everything for something bigger than themselves." The network still exists. I've seen the evidence in his files. We just need to reactivate it. She pulled out her phone, showing them a contact list she'd discovered encrypted in her grandfather's computer. Names and numbers spanning the continent, coded references to Noah's Road. What she now understood was an underground railroad for endangered species. "Marcus, you know the terrain better than anyone. Can you get us to the old mining tunnels without being spotted?" He nodded slowly. "It'll be dangerous, but yes." "Dr. Petrov, how quickly can we get genetic samples and data backed up to secure servers?" 6 hours, maybe less if we focus on the priority species. Maya turned to Elena. "And you, I need you to activate every contact you have, media, law enforcement, anyone who might listen. We're going to give them a story too big to bury." Outside, the sound of approaching engines grew louder. Maya looked through the window to see dust clouds rising from the access road. "It looks like we're out of time for planning," she said, grabbing her grandfather's rifle from its mount on the wall. "Everyone ready to improvise?" The pre-dawn darkness felt different now, charged with an electricity that made Maya's skin crawl. She crouched behind the main barn with Dr. Chen and Jake, watching the convoy of black SUVs wind up the access road like a serpent of steel and glass. 6 vehicles, maybe more. Enough firepower to end everything they'd fought to protect. "They're early," Jake whispered, checking his watch. "Bastards probably hope to catch us sleeping." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she counted the shadows emerging from the vehicles. 12, 15, 20 armed figures spreading across her property with military precision. These weren't the fumbling corporate security guards from before. These were professionals. "The animals," she breathed. "Already moving," Dr. Chen assured her. "Sarah triggered the emergency protocols the moment our perimeter sensors detected them. The big cats are in the deep caves, and the others are following the mountain trails we've been preparing." But Maya knew they couldn't evacuate everyone in time. The ranch housed over 200 creatures, many too young, old, or injured to make the treacherous journey to the backup sites. And then there was Ghost. The magnificent white tiger was still recovering from his infected wound, barely able to walk, let alone navigate mountain terrain. A spotlight blazed to life, sweeping across the main compound. Maya pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the beam passed overhead, her grandfather's journal a comforting weight in her jacket pocket. The pages contained more than just animal records. They held evidence of decades of illegal activity, names and dates that could bring down the entire conspiracy. There, a voice carried across the crisp air, movement by the eastern paddocks. Gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks echoing off the mountainsides. Maya flinched, praying it was just shadows the mercenaries were shooting at. But her blood turned to ice when she heard the anguished roar that followed. Deep, powerful, unmistakably feline. "Ghost," she whispered, already moving before Jake could grab her arm. "Maya, no, it's suicide." But she was done hiding, while others paid the price for her grandfather's secrets. She broke from cover, sprinting toward the sound, using the barn's bulk to shield her from the searching spotlights. Behind her, she heard Jake cursing and Dr. Chen hissing urgent instructions into his radio. The eastern paddocks were chaos. 2 mercenaries had cornered Ghost near the medical facility, the wounded tiger backed against a fence with nowhere to run. Blood darkened his white coat, fresh blood from a new wound. He snarled defiance despite his injuries, but Maya could see exhaustion in every line of his massive frame. "Target acquired," one of the gunmen spoke into his headset, requesting permission to terminate. Maya didn't think. She grabbed a feed bucket and hurled it at the nearest mercenary, the metal clanging against his helmet. As both men spun toward her, Ghost exploded into motion despite his wounds, a blur of white fury that sent one attacker sprawling. "Run!" Maya shouted, though she knew the tiger couldn't understand her words. But something in her voice, some desperate urgency, seemed to reach him. Ghost limped toward the tree line, disappearing into the shadows just as reinforcements arrived. A familiar figure emerged from the lead SUV, and Maya's stomach lurched with recognition. Marcus Blackwood stepped into the light, his expensive suit replaced by tactical gear, but his cold smile unchanged. "Miss Torres," he said pleasantly, as if they were meeting for coffee rather than an armed assault. "I had hoped we could resolve this more amicably. By murdering innocent animals," Maya spat. "By protecting a multi-billion-dollar operation that provides medical breakthroughs for humanity." His tone never wavered from conversational. "Your grandfather understood the bigger picture. These creatures serve a greater purpose than simply existing. They're not lab rats. They're living beings with their commodities." Blackwood's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating predator beneath. Extremely valuable ones that certain parties have invested heavily in acquiring. The research possibilities alone. He gestured to his men, who began systematically searching the buildings. Maya heard crashes and shouts as they tore through her grandfather's life's work, destroying everything they couldn't steal. "The documentation, Miss Torres, your grandfather's research notes, breeding records, genetic profiles. You'll save everyone considerable trouble by producing them now." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I don't know what you're talking about." Blackwood sighed theatrically and nodded to one of his subordinates. The man raised his weapon toward Jake. "I think you do, and I think you'll remember very quickly once the consequences become tangible." The mountains around them seemed to hold their breath, ancient peaks bearing witness to this deadly standoff. Somewhere in those shadows, 200 lives hung in the balance, depending on choices Maya would make in the next few heartbeats. The weight of her grandfather's journal pressed against her ribs like a promise. The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Maya crouched behind the barn, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the gaps in the weathered wood, she could see armed figures rappelling down ropes, their boots hitting the ground with military precision. 6 men in tactical gear, automatic weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun. Dr. Chen pressed against the barn wall beside her, his face pale but determined. "The emergency protocols," he whispered urgently. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they reach the main habitats." Maya's mind raced through the contingency plans her grandfather had drilled into every ranch hand. Hidden passages, reinforced shelters, emergency tranquilizer systems. Walter Reeves had prepared for this day, even as he'd hoped it would never come. But seeing it unfold felt surreal, like watching her own nightmare materialize. The radio in Chen's pocket crackled to life. "All units, maintain radio silence unless compromised," came Rodriguez's tense voice. The head of security had taken position near the perimeter with 3 other guards, buying them precious time. Chen's voice was steady despite the chaos. "I need you to get to the underground facility, the snow leopards, the Sumatran tigers, if Blackwood's people find them." "I'm not leaving you," she cut him off, then immediately regretted the decision as his expression hardened. "This isn't about heroics. Those animals are irreplaceable. Some are the last of their kind." His eyes burned with an intensity she'd never seen before. "Your grandfather trusted you with this legacy. Don't let his sacrifice be meaningless." Another helicopter appeared on the horizon, smaller than the first. Maya's blood ran cold until she recognized the Wildlife Federation markings on its side. The cavalry Chen had called was arriving, but would they be in time? The sound of splintering wood came from the main house. Maya watched through the barn's broken window as 3 tactical operatives kicked down her front door, their weapons raised. One of them was speaking into a radio, coordinating the search. "They're looking for the research," Chen whispered. "The genetic databases, breeding records, everything that proves what we've accomplished here." Maya thought of the hidden server room beneath the study, behind the false wall her grandfather had installed years ago. The digital records were safe for now, but if Blackwood's mercenaries found the physical evidence scattered throughout the ranch, they could piece together enough to destroy everything. A new sound cut through the air, the distinctive roar of a Siberian tiger. "Boris, Agitated by the helicopter noise and unfamiliar scents, Maya's stomach dropped. The big cats were supposed to be in the reinforced shelters by now, sedated and hidden until the danger passed. The explosion knocked them both to the ground. Maya's ears rang as debris rained down around them. Through the smoke and dust, she could see flames licking at the roof of the main animal hospital. They weren't just here to steal or capture, they were here to destroy everything. Chen struggled to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The backup power, he gasped. If the containment systems fail, he didn't need to finish. Maya had seen what happened when frightened exotic animals broke free. The ranch's sophisticated barrier systems were the only thing keeping 200 dangerous predators contained. Without power, those barriers would fail within hours. The radio crackled again. This time it was Sarah's voice, tight with fear. Multiple breaches on the south perimeter. I've got the primates secured, but the wolves... Static consumed her transmission. Maya made her decision. Grabbing the emergency flare gun from the barn's equipment wall, she sprinted toward the generator building. The main power lines had been severed in the explosion, but the backup systems could still keep the essential barriers operational. Gunfire erupted behind her as Chen engaged two mercenaries who'd rounded the barn. Maya didn't look back. The generator building was 50 yards away, across open ground that offered no cover. She could see one of Blackwood's men stationed near the entrance, his attention focused on the radio chatter from his team. The Wildlife Federation helicopter was circling now, but they couldn't land with active shooters on the ground. Maya was on her own. She pulled the pin from a smoke grenade Chen had given her and hurled it toward the generator building. Grey smoke billowed across the yard as she sprinted through the haze, her lungs burning. The mercenary near the entrance was shouting into his radio, trying to coordinate through the chaos. 20 yards, 10. Maya raised the flare gun as the man's weapon swung toward her. The radio crackled to life just as Maya finished securing the last of the emergency supplies in the underground bunker. Dr. Chen's voice cut through the static, urgent and breathless. Maya, they're moving faster than we anticipated. 3 convoys spotted on Highway 200, about 20 miles out. You need to get those animals secured now. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she grabbed the radio. How long do we have? 40 minutes, maybe less if they split up and take the back roads. Maya sprinted from the bunker toward the main compound, her grandfather's journal clutched in her free hand. The pages she'd been studying all night contained detailed evacuation protocols he'd never hoped she'd need to use. But here she was, racing against time to save creatures that shouldn't exist and protect secrets that could reshape everything the world thought it knew about evolution. The Siberian tigers were first. Mikhail and Katerina prowled restlessly in their enclosure, sensing the tension that had electrified the entire ranch. Maya's hands shook as she activated the hidden mechanism her grandfather had built into the fence, a series of tunnels that connected each habitat to the extensive cave system beneath the property. "Come on, beautiful," she whispered, holding out the scented lure that would guide them underground. "Just like Grandpa trained you." Katerina's amber eyes fixed on Maya's, intelligence gleaming in their depths. The massive cat padded forward, then turned back to ensure her mate followed. Within minutes, both tigers had vanished into the darkness below. The radio squawked again. "Maya, I'm picking up radio chatter. They're definitely military and they're talking about asset recovery and eliminating witnesses. You need to get underground yourself." "Not yet," Maya gasped, already running toward the next enclosure. "I won't leave them." The snow leopards proved more challenging. Zara had given birth just 2 weeks ago, and her protective instincts warred with her training. Maya could hear vehicles in the distance now, still miles away but getting closer. The sound of engines carried clearly in the crisp mountain air. "Please, Zara," Maya pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Trust me like you trusted him." It was Jake who made the difference. He appeared at her shoulder, moving with surprising stealth for someone recovering from a gunshot wound. "You take the cub," he said quietly. "I'll handle Zara." Maya watched in amazement as Jake approached the leopard with the same calm confidence her grandfather had always shown. Whatever doubts she'd harbored about his loyalty evaporated as Zara responded to his gentle commands, allowing him to guide her toward the tunnel entrance. They worked in frantic harmony, Maya and Jake moving from enclosure to enclosure. The Arctic foxes scampered into their tunnel like quicksilver. The bears required more coaxing, but eventually lumbered into the depths. With each successful evacuation, Maya felt a mixture of relief and mounting dread. "Last ones," Jake said, nodding toward the wolves. Fenris stood at the fence line, his pack arrayed behind him. The massive wolf's yellow eyes seemed to bore into Maya's soul, and for a moment she felt the weight of leadership that had crushed her grandfather. These weren't just animals, they were living proof of evolution's hidden paths, each one representing millions of years of adaptation and survival. "I know," she whispered to Fenris. "I know what this means." The wolf held her gaze for another heartbeat, then turned and led his pack into the tunnel without hesitation. Maya slammed the concealed entrance shut just as headlights crested the hill. Her hands flew over the camouflage controls, sealing every trace of the underground network. To anyone looking, the ranch would appear abandoned, the enclosures empty of everything but wind and shadows. "Maya!" Jake's urgent whisper cut through her focus. "We need to go. Now." They ran for the bunker as the first vehicles roared into the ranch compound. Behind them, floodlights blazed to life, turning night into harsh day. Maya could hear doors slamming, boots on gravel, shouted orders that made her blood run cold. The bunker's entrance was hidden beneath the old storm cellar, accessible only through a tunnel that ran from the main house's basement. Maya and Jake dropped through the concealed hatch just as the front door exploded inward above them. In the darkness below, surrounded by her grandfather's emergency supplies and backup generators, Maya finally allowed herself to breathe. The animals were safe, the secret was protected. But as boots thundered overhead and voices barked commands to search every inch of the property, she realized that her own survival was far from guaranteed. The radio crackled one final time. Dr. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. "Maya, are you there? Maya, please respond." She couldn't answer, not with hostile forces directly above them. All she could do was listen to the sounds of her grandfather's life's work being torn apart, and pray that his final contingency plan would be enough to see them through the storm. The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Maya pressed her back against the rocky outcropping, her heart hammering against her ribs. Dust and debris swirled around her as the aircraft circled like a predator, its searchlight cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. She clutched the waterproof case containing her grandfather's research files, the evidence that would expose everything. "They're closing the perimeter," Jake's voice crackled through her radio. He was positioned near the main compound with Dr. Chen, coordinating the final evacuation of the most vulnerable animals. "How many exits do you have?" Maya peered around the rock, counting the armed figures moving through the valley below. Blackwood's mercenaries had arrived faster than anticipated, their tactical lights sweeping methodically across the terrain. "Not many," she whispered back. "Maybe I can reach the old mining tunnel if I time it right." The helicopter banked sharply, its spotlight finding her position. Maya threw herself deeper into the shadows as bullets sparked off the stone inches from her head. Her grandfather's sanctuary, his life's work, was under siege, and she was running out of options. In the distance, she could hear the distressed calls of the animals. The Przewalski's horses were neighing frantically in their enclosure, while the snow leopards paced restlessly in their habitat. These creatures had known safety here for decades, hidden from a world that would exploit or destroy them. Now that sanctuary was crumbling. "Maya, listen to me," Dr. Chen's urgent voice cut through the static. "I've got the genetic samples secured, but we need those research files. Without your grandfather's documentation, we can't prove the breeding program's legitimacy. Blackwood will claim we're poachers." She knew Chen was right. The files contained decades of meticulous records, birth certificates, genetic lineages, correspondence with international conservation groups. Her grandfather hadn't just been hiding these animals, he'd been part of a vast underground network dedicated to preserving species on the brink of extinction, species that certain powerful interests wanted to remain extinct. The helicopter moved off, but Maya could hear vehicles approaching on the access road. Time was running out. She keyed her radio. "Jake, what's the status on the transport trucks?" "First convoy's already rolling with the big cats and the Javan rhinos. But we've got problems. Roadblocks on Highway 200. Blackwood's people are ahead of us." Maya's blood ran cold. Those animals represented genetic lines that existed nowhere else on Earth. If Blackwood's forces intercepted them, it wouldn't just be imprisonment or relocation. It would be elimination. No witnesses, no evidence. She made her decision. Change of plans. Take them through the Bitterroot passes. Use the old logging roads grandfather showed me. "Maya, those roads haven't been maintained in years. In this weather, it's the only way." She was already moving, using the rocky terrain for cover as she worked her way toward the mining tunnel. "I'll create a distraction. Give you time to get clear." The tunnel entrance was partially concealed by decades of overgrowth. Maya had explored it as a child during visits to the ranch, never imagining she'd use it to escape armed mercenaries. She squeezed through the narrow opening, her flashlight beam revealing rusted mining equipment and water-stained walls. Her radio crackled. "Maya, we've got movement near the research lab. They're going to find the genetic vault." The vault, her grandfather's most closely guarded secret. Frozen embryos and genetic material from species the world believed were already lost. If Blackwood's people reached it first, they could destroy evidence of their own complicity in these extinctions. Maya emerged from the tunnel behind the compound's main buildings. Through the lab windows, she could see figures in tactical gear systematically destroying equipment. They weren't here to capture, they were here to erase. She pulled out her phone, checking the secure upload status. 73% complete. Before leaving the safe house, she'd begun uploading copies of the most critical files to multiple news outlets and conservation organizations worldwide. Her grandfather had taught her that information wanted to be free, especially information that could save lives. Explosion rocked the research lab, orange flames licking at the windows. They were being thorough, destroying everything that could implicate their backers. Maya's anger flared. These weren't just buildings burning. This was 40 years of irreplaceable research, gone forever. But not everything was lost. As sirens wailed in the distance, Maya realized that the real victory wouldn't be saving every animal or preserving every file. It would be ensuring that the truth survived, that the network her grandfather had died protecting could continue its work elsewhere. Her phone chimed softly. Upload complete. Maya smiled grimly as she melted back into the forest. Blackwood's people could burn the buildings and scatter the animals, but they couldn't stop what was already in motion. The story was out there now, spreading through digital networks faster than any helicopter could fly. The sanctuary was ending, but the mission would continue. The sound of approaching helicopters shattered the mountain silence like thunder. Maya pressed herself against the barn wall, her heart hammering as she watched 3 black aircraft descend toward the ranch. Through the radio crackle in her earpiece, she heard Jake's voice from his position near the main house. They're landing in the front pasture. At least a dozen men, all armed. Maya's grip tightened on the tranquilizer gun Dr. Chen had given her. Around the property, her grandfather's hidden network, people she'd never known existed until 3 days ago, waited in carefully planned positions. Former wildlife officers, retired veterinarians, a handful of locals who'd kept this secret for 30 years, all of them ready to protect what her grandfather had built. "Remember," came Dr. Chen's steady voice through the radio, "our priority is the animals. We evacuate what we can through the North Trail while Maya and Jake hold them here." Maya watched as Vincent Carver stepped out of the lead helicopter, his expensive suit incongruous against the Montana wilderness. Behind him came a team of mercenaries, because that's what they were, she realized, not security guards or corporate enforcers. These men moved with military precision, faces hard as granite. She thought of the magnificent Siberian tiger currently sedated in the underground facility, the last breeding pair of Javan rhinos hidden in the valley caves, the clutch of California condor eggs in the temperature-controlled nursery, creatures that officially didn't exist, that were supposed to be extinct or impossibly rare. Her grandfather had saved them all, creating a secret ark in the Montana mountains, and Carver wanted them dead. Witnesses to illegal experiments, he'd called them, evidence of research that could topple governments and destroy billion-dollar industries. Maya. Jake's voice brought her back to the present. She could see him now, emerging from behind the equipment shed with his hands raised. "They're asking for you." She took a deep breath and stepped into the open. Carver's cold smile greeted her as she walked toward the assembled group, her boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. "Miss Chen," Carver said, using the false name she'd given him days ago. "Though I suspect that's not your real name, is it? You're Maya Blackwood, Thomas Blackwood's granddaughter. What do you want, Carver?" "What I've always wanted. To clean up a mess that should have been dealt with decades ago." He gestured toward the outbuildings. "Your grandfather was a fool. A brilliant fool, but a fool nonetheless. He thought he could play God, hide these abominations from the world. Those abominations are the last of their species. He saved them." Carver laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Saved them?" "He stole them. From zoos, from research facilities, from governments. Do you have any idea how many laws he broke? How many international treaties he violated?" Maya felt rage building in her chest. "And what were you doing to them? What experiments were worth genocide?" "Progress." Carver's expression hardened. "Medical advances that could save millions of human lives. But your grandfather and his bleeding heart network couldn't see the bigger picture. They rescued the animals before we could complete our research." "Research?" Maya spat the word. "You mean torture?" One of Carver's men stepped forward, raising his weapon, but Carver held up a hand. "Where are they, Miss Blackwood? We've detected heat signatures throughout the property, but the underground facilities seem empty." Maya allowed herself a small smile. "Did you really think we'd make this easy for you?" Through her earpiece, she could hear the soft confirmations of her allies. The animals were moving through the hidden tunnel system her grandfather had spent decades constructing, emergency protocols activated, species after species disappearing into the deep mountain caves and secondary facilities. "You're too late," she said. Carver's composure cracked. "Search everywhere," he barked to his men. "Tear this place apart if you have to." As the mercenaries fanned out across the property, Maya caught Jake's eye. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. Their job now was to buy time, to keep Carver's people busy while the evacuation continued. "There's something else you should know," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the cold air, "about the evidence my grandfather gathered. The documentation of what you did to those animals, the financial records, the government connections, the cover-ups." Carver went very still. "What evidence?" 30 years' worth. Every crime, every payoff, every murder you committed to keep this quiet." Maya's smile widened. "Did you think he was just some crazy old man hoarding exotic pets? He was building a case against you, against all of you. Where is it?" "Safe. And if anything happens to me, to Jake, or to any of these animals, it all goes public. Every newspaper, every government agency, every international court that might be interested." The helicopter's rotors still turned in the background, a mechanical heartbeat counting down to something neither side could predict. Maya stood her ground, knowing that everything her grandfather had worked for, everything he'd died protecting, depended on what happened in the next few minutes. The final confrontation had begun. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch as Maya stood on the porch, watching the last of the government vehicles disappear down the dirt road. Dr. Sarah Chen walked up beside her, clipboard in hand and a weary but satisfied expression on her face. "The snow leopards are settling in beautifully at the Colorado facility," Sarah said, "and the Sumatran tigers seem to have taken to their new enclosure immediately. The breeding program coordinators are already making plans." Maya nodded, though a bittersweet ache settled in her chest. 3 weeks had passed since Blackwood's arrest, and the ranch had been a constant flurry of activity as wildlife experts, veterinarians and conservationists worked to relocate the animals to proper facilities around the world. Each departure felt like saying goodbye to family. "The Przewalski's horses were the last to go?" Maya asked. "Yesterday evening. They're heading to a rewilding project in Mongolia. Your grandfather would have loved that, bringing them home." Sarah's voice carried the same mixture of sadness and hope that Maya felt. Maya pulled her grandfather's journal from her jacket pocket, its worn leather cover soft from handling. She'd read it cover to cover at least a dozen times now, marveling at the careful documentation of each rescue, each birth, each small victory in what had seemed like an impossible mission. "I keep thinking about what he wrote here," Maya said, opening to a page she'd practically memorized. About how the animals taught him that some kinds of love require letting go. The sound of tires on gravel drew their attention. A familiar blue pickup truck rounded the bend, and Maya felt her heart lift as Jake climbed out, followed by Tom Hartley. The old rancher had become an unexpected ally once the truth came out, offering his own land as temporary housing during the transition. "How's our girl doing?" Jake asked, wrapping Maya in a warm embrace. "Better than I expected," she admitted, leaning into his solid presence, "though the silence is going to take some getting used to." Tom chuckled, adjusting his weathered hat. "Silence on this ranch? You obviously haven't spent much time around here after dark. The coyotes, the owls, the wind through those pines. This place has its own symphony." As if summoned by his words, a soft nickering came from the small paddock near the main barn. Maya smiled despite herself. Not all the animals had left. "Storm's looking good," Jake observed, watching the elderly Arabian horse move slowly but steadily across the enclosure. The vet said another few weeks, and he should be ready for light riding again. Storm had been the one animal deemed too old and fragile for relocation. The stress of transport might have killed him, so Maya had made the decision to keep him here along with a small handful of domestic animals that had somehow found their way to the ranch over the years, a few rescue horses, some goats, and a barn cat with attitude to spare. "Speaking of which," Sarah said, consulting her clipboard one final time, "the legal paperwork is all finalized. The ranch is officially registered as a wildlife sanctuary and rehabilitation center. Small scale but legitimate. When you're ready to take in new animals, you'll have all the proper permits." Maya felt a flutter of nervousness and excitement. The idea had been Jake's initially. Why not honor her grandfather's legacy by continuing the work, but openly this time, in partnership with established conservation organizations? "The first residents are scheduled to arrive next month," Sarah continued. 3 orphaned black bear cubs from Yellowstone. They'll need rehabilitation before release back to the wild." "No more secrets," Maya murmured, thinking of all the lies and hidden agendas that had nearly destroyed everything her grandfather had built. "No more secrets," Jake agreed, squeezing her hand. Tom cleared his throat. "Well, I should head back. Promised Martha I'd help with the church fundraiser planning, but Maya, you remember, you need anything at all, you just holler. Your grandfather was a good man, and what you've done here, bringing everything into the light, that took real courage." After Tom left and Sarah departed for the airport, Maya and Jake walked through the ranch together. The enclosures stood empty but clean, ready for new inhabitants. The veterinary clinic sparkled with new equipment donated by conservation groups. The feed storage areas had been restocked and reorganized. "Any regrets?" Jake asked as they reached the spot where the snow leopard enclosure had been. Maya considered the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a city art teacher with a simple life and no responsibilities beyond her students. Now she was the caretaker of a sprawling ranch, the guardian of her grandfather's legacy, and about to embark on a future she never could have imagined. "No," she said finally, watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. "No regrets. This is where I belong." As twilight painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, Maya felt her grandfather's presence in the whisper of wind through the trees. in the ancient rhythm of the land itself, welcoming her home.